China said that they oppose unilateral sanctions that have no basis in international law and are not authorized by the UN Security Council. They are evading sanctions by using shadow fleets, a common tactic that the Russian Federation has employed over the past nearly 4 years of this conflict, as the sanctions have been imposed one after another till the point where we have over 22,000 sanctions on the Russian Federation. How do we know this? Because, of course, we have satellite footage showing China is conducting ship-to-ship transfers of Russian oil from shadow vessels. Trump has given up any semblance of actually trying to solve the proxy war in Ukraine. You know, he's abandoned the idea of negotiations. He's abandoned the idea of actually hearing the Russians out, seemingly. He's supposed to have this meeting in Budapest, but now he's canceled it. I don't really understand why, considering he said he was going to end the war in 24 hours. But he's resorted to the Biden-era tactics of sanctioning Russia, because the sanctions that Biden imposed were oh so successful. Even Donald Trump made fun of the sanctions because it's like the sanctions are not working. The first round of sanctions didn't work. The EU is on the 19th round of sanctions. They don't work. Russia's economy is as strong as ever, and they've replaced a lot of these Western businesses with Russian businesses. And those that they haven't replaced, they look east. They look to the UAE. They look to China. They look elsewhere. And it's been quite successful. Russia has developed their own line of domestic-made commercial jets now. Everything is produced in Russia. They have their own clothing brands. Even McDonald's got replaced by Vkusna i Tochka, their own Russian McDonald's, and it tastes just as good. The Russian oil. Let's talk about Russian oil because, of course, this is how Putin is funding his war machine. Russian oil. Well, Donald Trump got the great idea, probably from Lindsey Graham, that, well, if you just sanction Lukoil and Rosneft, the two largest oil companies in Russia, you'll bring Russia's economy to a screeching halt. A screeching halt, and Putin will be forced to surrender. Let's see how that works out. The U.S. last week decided they were going to sanction Rosneft and Lukoil. Okay. Interesting decision. How does President Putin respond? Is he flustered? Is he upset? Is he saying, you must stop this immediately? As for the new sanctions, President Putin said, first of all, there is nothing new. Yes, they are of a serious nature for us, of course. It is clear, and they will have certain consequences, but they will not significantly affect our economic well-being, he says. In his first presidential iteration, it is known that President Trump imposed the most number of sanctions that had been imposed against the Russian Federation up until then. They currently have, of course, two aspects, both purely political and economic. As for the political, what are we really talking about? This is, of course, an attempt to put pressure on Russia. But no self-respecting country and no self-respecting nation ever decides anything under the pressure. And of course, Russia has this privilege to consider itself on this list of self-respecting countries and peoples. So Russia doesn't really care about these sanctions. Former Russian President Medvedev said this: the new sanctions from the US and Europe will not stop Russia. On the contrary, they will give Kiev the opportunity to strike even more violently than before. The US created the Kiev regime. Either the US will stop them or we will stop them. Now let's see how countries are actually responding to this, because the whole idea of this Rosneft and Lukoil sanctions are to target India and China. Obviously, two of the biggest importers of Russian oil from Rosneft and from Lukoil. Now, I'll just get this out of the way because we're going to be talking about China for the duration of this story. But India put out a statement saying, interesting, we'll review our compliance with these new sanctions from the United States. And that's all they said. They didn't say like, oh my God, we're going to stop importing the Russian oil. Because you know how much money they're making? They've been very clear that they don't care about what sanctions are imposed by the EU, by the US. They don't care. Jaishankar, the foreign minister, and even the oil minister, the energy minister in India said like, well, this is a quote unquote free market. The US does not control the international free market. And who's going to stop us from buying Russian oil and then refining it and selling it to Europe. Europe's not stopping us because they're buying this refined oil, refined petroleum, each and every day. Very large amounts of it. They're not stopping. Now, China came out with an even better response. China said that they oppose unilateral sanctions that have no basis in international law and are not authorized by the UN Security Council. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Why should we care what the U.S. thinks about our oil purchases? We don't care. It's not a UN sanctioned, strike upon international trade. This is I guess, a unilateral decision of the United States. Now, what was amazing about this story is Reuters came out immediately and they said Chinese state oil majors suspend purchases of seaborne Russian oil after the U.S. slapped sanctions on Russian giants Rosneft and Lukoil. The Chinese majors set to cut seaborne Russian oil purchases are Sinopec, PetroChina, CNOOC, and Xinhua Oil. Well, that's according to British Reuters. Reuters says that China is going to do this. China did not say they're going to do this. Reuters said they're going to do this. So the question is, what does China say? Well, you just heard what China said. China said, we don't care. These are not UN, unanimous consent sanctions on the Russian Federation. This is a unilateral move by the United States. Practically, these mean nothing. And China actually is continuing the import of Russian oil. How? They're evading sanctions by using shadow fleets, a common tactic that the Russian Federation has employed over the past nearly 4 years of this conflict, as the sanctions have been imposed one after another until the point where we have over 22,000 sanctions on the Russian Federation. They're using shadow fleets. Shadow fleets are a legal gray area. These often employ oil vessels, gas vessels that are purchased secondhand by the Russian Federation. And they skirt around the legal norms of international trade. Okay. How do we know this? Because, of course, we have satellite footage showing that China is conducting ship-to-ship transfers of Russian oil from shadow vessels. Everyone knows this. There's an entire market, a multi-billion-dollar market that has been utilized for years. Primarily by the Greeks have been utilizing shadow vessels for a very long time. Obviously, Greek shipping is a major industry. They sell ships to countries that want shadow vessels, and in some cases, they utilize ships. But this is a common tactic that has been employed long before the Russian Federation decided that it was a good way to skirt sanctions. China will not abide by sanctions that are not authorized by the UN Security Council. Again, from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. And just today, we have President Vladimir Putin signing the law on Chinese-Russia Mutual Investment Protection Agreement. So it looks like these sanctions have yet again not bared to be as fruitful as the United States hoped they'd be. India is still going to buy Russian oil. China is still going to buy Russian oil. And the United States still looks like the clown.